They told me I was being let go while I was still sipping from the company mug I won at last year's holiday party. It was chipped near the handle, but I never replaced it. Somehow it made the coffee taste more like something I earned. The Zoom call came with a 1-minute warning. A Slack ping. Quick sync, Avery. HR joining. No subject line. No emojis. Just that sterile kind of urgency that smells like paperwork. I clicked the link with half a granola bar still in my mouth and my browser still open to a client forecast I'd spent 3 nights building. The screen flickered. Then came the beige smile of Lauren from HR, blinking too fast and reading from something I couldn't see. Hi, Avery. Thanks for joining. This is part of a broader realignment. I blinked, thinking it was a joke. Some twisted performance review tactic, maybe? Greg was there too. Camera on, microphone off. His background was a blurred skyline, his usual. He didn't even look at me. Just stared somewhere to the left of the lens, like I wasn't real. My coffee had gone lukewarm, but I kept holding the mug. The silence between Lauren's paragraphs stretched longer than the words themselves. We appreciate your contributions over the years. Effective today, your access to company systems will be suspended by end of business. You'll receive a follow-up email outlining severance options. If you have questions, please direct them to HR support at. I heard the sound of my own breathing, louder than it should have been. I glanced at Greg again. Still nothing. A man who once high-fived me in the hallway after I landed our biggest biotech contract was now watching this like it was someone else's funeral. My phone buzzed under the desk. A text from Jordan, our CEO. Let's catch up soon. Big things coming. Sent exactly 1 minute before this meeting. I wanted to laugh. The call ended without fanfare. Just a soft click and the faint sound of a Slack logout chime in the background. I didn't leave my seat. My eyes stayed on the blank Zoom window for a full minute before it faded. I thought about calling someone. But who? My mother would ask if I had eaten, not if I had fought back. My ex would probably assume I'd finally burned out. And everyone else? They'd just whisper and share the news through GIFs and group DMs like it was entertainment. Instead, I reached for the fridge. My fingers grazed a small laminated card near the corner. My mom's waffle recipe, slightly faded, with a tiny grease stain in the corner. I had laminated it myself the week she had her stroke. I used to think it was about preserving her handwriting. Now I know it was about preserving routine. I stood there, forehead against the fridge, until my coffee cooled completely. The fog outside had thickened. The city, in its usual blur, didn't care that I had just been erased by people I helped make rich. Then I opened my laptop, not the work-issued one, which would soon lock me out. This one was mine. Private. No VPN. No shared folders. Just local files, organized like a librarian with a grudge. I typed in the password, Mosaic plus exit. A folder popped up on the desktop. Exit kit. Inside were subfolders. Vendor invoices, Slack exports, screen recordings, contracts, annotated. Each one time-stamped. Each one quietly collected over the last 6 months, not because I knew this day would come, but because I always suspected it might. That's the thing about working in places built on charisma and caffeine. You start noticing when real work gets hidden behind buzzwords. When your wins become someone else's LinkedIn headline. When the intern who flirts up the right ladder gets promoted over your top analyst. You learn to save receipts. Not metaphorically. Literally. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I clicked the folder name, deleted exit kit, and typed a new title, Monday. Then I shut the lid. And I smiled, just a little, because the waffle recipe was still on the fridge, and tomorrow I'd need it. People say don't make big decisions when you're emotional. I say make backups when you're underestimated. That weekend, I wasn't sure if I was making the smartest decision, but I knew I had no choice. It was a gray Saturday in San Francisco. The kind of day when the fog creeps low and the city feels both alive and hushed. I found myself at the co-working space I used to rent before the startup swallowed me whole. The familiar hum of laptops, murmurs, and the clink of coffee cups felt oddly grounding. I'd spent the morning scrolling through old emails and screenshots, everything I'd quietly saved over the past year. Contracts annotated with highlights and notes, Slack threads that never saw the light of day, vendor invoices that didn't add up. The evidence wasn't just enough. It was a blueprint. A blueprint for my silent rebellion. Reaching for my phone, I opened Signal and typed a message to Asia Monroe, my former coworker who'd been fired months ago for being too outspoken. Need to talk. Side project. Big one. Minutes later, a reply came. Count me in. When? I smiled. Even in chaos, some things stayed the same. Next, I contacted Connor Patel, the quiet genius of our dev team. He never cared for small talk, but showed up when it mattered most. His reply was succinct, just 2 words. Always ready. That night, I dug through my phone and stumbled upon a playlist called Launch Codes. It was a mix my ex had made when we were still dreaming big together. Songs about taking chances, breaking free, and fighting back. For a moment, I let the music wash over me, reminding me of the person I was before the deals, the betrayals, and the corporate chess game. I pulled out the grocery list my mom had written years ago, the one with scribbled notes in the margins about which brand of soup she liked best. I wasn't hungry, but I reheated a bowl of chili anyway, savoring the warmth more than the taste. The list was a small anchor, a reminder of simpler times and the sacrifices that shaped me. Late into the night, I dusted off a pitch deck I'd shelved 2 years ago, the one I'd abandoned when Mom's stroke forced me to set aside my dreams. But now, that deck felt like a seed waiting to grow. I renamed the project Maven. Sunday passed with frantic emails, encrypted chats, and calls whispered through secure lines. My resolve hardened, and by the time the city lights dimmed, I was no longer just the woman who got fired. I was the woman who was about to fight back. And then, just as the clock neared midnight, my phone buzzed with a single message from Connor. You in? I stared at the screen, the weight of the moment settling around me. This wasn't a form to sign or a checkbox to tick. It was my future, finally within reach. I tapped yes. By the time EtherCore logged in for their 9 a.m. stand-up, I'd already deployed my opening act. The city was wrapped in that familiar San Francisco fog, soft and dense enough to blur the edges of the towering glass buildings downtown. Outside, a billboard truck slowly circled EtherCore's headquarters, its neon text pulsing rhythmically. If you walk out, you'll never work in this town. I sat inside a tiny cafe, its cracked tile floors and chipped wooden chairs barely matching the hum of anticipation inside me. I sipped black coffee and nibbled on a waffle, my mom's homemade recipe wrapped carefully in wax paper, small comforts for a morning that was anything but. Clara Lee's voice echoed in my mind, a whisper from a few months back during one of our late-night strategy calls. Just wait until they underestimate you. That's the fun part. And she was right. With a few clicks, I hit send on the anonymous press leak. The dossier laid bare misuse of company funds, false expense reports, and dozens of toxic workplace testimonials collected from whispers in hallways and closed-door meetings. Almost immediately, EtherCore released a vague tweet wishing me well. But the public wasn't buying the polite facade. Tech forums lit up with discussion, and social media churned with speculation. On my phone screen, I watched as my name began trending quietly under several tech news feeds, not with the fanfare I had hoped for, but with a steady, growing pulse. Asia and Connor were already in the loop. They texted updates about client responses and news outlet picks. My team was small, but strategic, each piece in place like a game of chess. Then came the real spark. A former EtherCore client, a biotech startup notorious for its cautiousness, posted a comment on LinkedIn. Excited to hear more from Maven Strategy Group. The message was short but powerful, a public vote of confidence that made the ripples we'd been creating start to swell into waves. I leaned back, the buzz of the cafe around me fading into the background. The weight of what was happening hit me in quiet waves. This wasn't just about exposing dirt, it was about rewriting the narrative. I wasn't here for a war, but if one came knocking, I wasn't about to turn down a revolution. I took another sip of coffee, the bitterness grounding me. Outside, the billboard truck completed another slow pass. Neon letters flickered like a heartbeat against the gray sky, and somewhere inside me, a seed of something fierce was taking root. By Tuesday, my inbox had turned into a confession booth. It wasn't the kind of place I expected to find solace, but between the flood of emails and encrypted messages, there was the raw truth, unfiltered and unexpected. Clara's words came back to me, clear as the morning fog outside our small co-working space turned war room. You don't need to dig if you plant landmines. That morning, the war room was alive with the clatter of keyboards and the low hum of the ancient espresso machine, which groaned as if complaining about the endless late nights. Fold-out tables stretched across the room, cluttered with monitors displaying code, legal documents, and streaming news feeds. The tension was thick, but so was our purpose. Asia was in her element, juggling schedules and fielding calls so I could focus. Connor, silent as ever, was glued to his laptop, tracing digital footprints and mapping out the cracks in EtherCore's defenses. Mallory, our junior strategist, quiet, almost invisible, sat across from me, eyes sharper than ever. She cleared her throat and lowered her voice. Greg tried to buy me off last week. 20 grand, no strings attached. I looked up, surprised not by the amount but by her refusal. And you said no? She nodded, lips tight. I'm not part of this mess. That was the moment I realized we had more than just luck and grit. We had loyalty, fractured but real. A few minutes later, Clara pinged a burner email with new intel, an upcoming investor meeting at EtherCore, shrouded in secrecy. The perfect stage for our next move. We convened quickly, deciding to drop a second payload, a meticulously targeted leak coupled with a press story exposing the rot inside, backed by internal documents we'd secured. As the clock ticked toward the live demo, Connor's fingers flew over the keyboard. Months ago, he'd written a custom plugin, a kind of digital landmine meant to trigger if anyone tried to cover tracks or hide malfeasance. At exactly 3:45 p.m., the attack launched silently. By 4 p.m., EtherCore's homepage was a glaring 404 error. Investors watching the live demo blinked in confusion. Whispers rippled through the room. By 4:01, our landing page recorded 12,000 hits. A victory, yes, but the war was far from over. Later that night, back in my apartment, I found a voice memo from my mom, recorded months ago. Her voice was soft, steady, full of quiet wisdom. You always did build better from scratch, Avery. Sometimes you have to burn the old house down before you can make it a home. I played it twice, letting her words settle. Then, with a calm I hadn't known I had, I deleted the file. Sometimes, Moving forward means leaving pieces of the past behind. They wanted to meet in private. I wore red. Not because I was trying to make a statement, though maybe I was. Red is a color that doesn't hide, and I wasn't about to disappear in that room. The Lafayette Hotel's room 212 was dim, smelling faintly of expensive cologne and damp leather. The rain tapped softly against the window pane, a quiet percussion that felt oddly fitting. As I smoothed the lapel of my blazer, I caught the weight of the small locket resting against my chest, my mother's, hidden beneath the fabric. A quiet reminder of why I was here, how far I'd come, and who I was fighting for. I flashed back to high school, standing behind a podium at a debate competition. The judge's words still echoed. "You're too polished to be sincere." I had learned then to weaponize both the polish and the sincerity, because sometimes you need a sword and a shield at the same time. Jordan Wells sat across from me, eyes sharp but clouded with something I couldn't place, fear maybe? Or regret masked by arrogance. Greg Maddox was jittery, tapping his fingers nervously on the table. The new PR guy, Mitchell, looked completely out of his depth, chewing gum and trying to look busy. The conversation started with the usual corporate dance. "We want to make this right," Jordan said smoothly. "A buyout, a C-level position in the merged company, and a standard NDA." I smiled, just enough to be polite. "Let me counter," I said, sliding a printed term sheet across the table. $20 million. Full intellectual property rights. A public apology from both Jordan and Greg, published in Fast Company. Silence settled like a heavy fog. Greg's voice finally broke it, shaky but venomous. "You're insane." I leaned forward, voice steady, eyes locked on his. "I'm expensive." The tension rose. Threats of lawsuits floated in the stale air. Mitchell fidgeted, whispering behind his hand. Then I placed a USB drive on the table, its label stark and undeniable. Emergency Exit Fund. Inside were spreadsheets, routing numbers, and documents linking a shell nonprofit to Greg and Jordan, a defunct entity funneling $6.7 million in rerouted company funds. Jordan's face paled. Greg swallowed hard. I stood, smoothed my sleeve, and said, "You're lucky I brought terms. Next time, I bring the press." I turned and walked out before anyone could respond. Rain had picked up outside, soaking the steps as I left. But I didn't care. I was still standing. They didn't just underestimate me. They handed me the microphone. Months ago, I sat in a boardroom, watching another woman get steamrolled during a meeting. She was brilliant, poised, and quiet enough to be ignored, and that silence cost her. I promised myself then, next time, I speak last. Tonight was that time. The Women in Tech Futures Gala was held in a refurbished art museum downtown San Francisco. High ceilings arched above soft gold lighting that shimmered off polished floors. Violinists played a haunting melody, and the clinking of expensive wine glasses filled the air, though most guests barely touched their drinks, caught up in the evening's heavy undercurrent. I sat at the table of honor, flanked by Linda Zhao, our lead investor, stone-faced but unwavering, and Dr. Quinn Rivera, who arrived late and nodded once with quiet respect. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled notes, and former colleagues mingled in the background, their expressions a blend of curiosity and caution. When my turn came, I stepped up slowly, the microphone cool in my hand. The room hushed. I spoke calmly, each word sharp and deliberate, slicing through the silence like a scalpel. I talked about systems that silence women, about how girls like me weren't supposed to lead, not really. Then, without warning, the screen behind me flickered to life. Names appeared one by one, faces of those ousted for abuse of power, for exploitation, for silence enforced. Across each photo, a bold red stamp, documented. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I looked out at the faces in the room, some shocked, some relieved, some regretful. As I finished, I stepped away from the mic. From the back row, Jordan watched. No words, no applause, just a cold, quiet acceptance that this chapter was over. The silence hung heavy for a moment, then thunderous applause broke out. Slow at first, then growing until the room shook with it. Backstage later, I slipped off my heels, revealing worn sneakers. I bit into a waffle wrapped carefully in wax paper, my mom's recipe. Still better than their hors d'oeuvres, I murmured, savoring the simple comfort. They tried to bury me, but I remembered where they left the shovel. I still remember clearly the feeling of standing on stage that day, not only my own victory, but also the voice for many people who have been silenced. Sometimes, strength does not come from shouting the loudest, but from quiet perseverance and careful preparation. In life, if we know how to care and listen to each other more, the wounds will have a chance to heal, and the fires of injustice will be extinguished by the torch of justice. Love is not only an emotion, but also an action, the power to change and rebuild from brokenness. If this story touches you, I hope you will share your feelings and together spread good values so that no one has to walk alone on the path of seeking justice and peace.